celebrations. But before that, something quite serious that we need to get stuck into. This week, you and I have talked quite a lot about violence, obviously in the wake of the machete ban and the fracas at the shopping centre that kind of preceded it. I think we've had a big focus on youth violence, a tendency to think of it all as gangs in the city, as a problem that happens there. Have you been to your local neighbourhood house recently? They run a lot of activities. There's a huge amount of work that goes on there. Community connection, education. They help people in need. Sometimes they're where people go for those food relief programs. But more than a few of them are reporting a rising number of violent incidents, and they are calling for more staff. Now, we're going to get into that in just a second, but I'd love to know, have you spent time out at your neighbourhood house? Have you been concerned for the people who work there? Have you even spotted some of these incidents yourself? Grab your phone. Let me know what's happening.
This is Nick Healy on ABC Radio Victoria.
Text on 0467 842 722 or call 1300 977 222.
Rob Hawkins, current treasurer and incoming chair of Open Door Neighbourhood House in Wangaratta. Really good morning to you.
Good morning.
Rob, some of your staff have been physically assaulted. Is that true?
That is correct. We've had two staff members that have been assaulted by a customer that came to the door to get food. That's caused us to have to put in a whole lot of changes to security and the way we operate to protect our staff.
Rob, first and foremost, are the staff okay?
Yes, the staff are being treated. Some have been off on work cover for a period of time, but they're coming back to work, and thankfully that seems to be progressing and going well.
You mentioned you've had to make some changes to security. What have you had to do at Open Door?
We've had to put in a new security system, including emergency closing of a sliding door that opens to the public for the pantry, and a means of because one of the assaults that we had, the customer at the door stuck their foot in the door and physically forced it open to get into and assault a staff member who was working there. And so we've had to make a few changes in that way.
Rob, I mean, first and foremost, that's an expense, which I'm assuming you definitely didn't need. But what's it done to the morale of the people who work there?
Staff were obviously shocked by it and affected by it. But we've brought in some extra training around conflict management, how staff can better deal with customers that come to the door, and so we've paid for that training to be undertaken, so that the staff would have the knowledge and the means to deal with customers like that. At the same time, we've actually changed the method of providing the service. Previously, people would come to the door, we'd open the door and we'd serve the customers. Now we've had to switch to a phone system where customers phone in, place their order, we put it together, and when they come, we give them the order that they've asked for the food.
That's a big change in process.
Yes, we've had to change the process and the way we do things because we've got to make sure our staff are protected from being assaulted.
Yeah, of course you do. Rob, hold there for a second because I've also got Keir Patterson, who's the CEO of Neighbourhood Houses Victoria, the peak state body that deals with neighbourhood houses. Keir, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Are other neighbourhood houses having similar problems?
They are. We're seeing a rising number of incidents across the state, from Warrnambool up to the Mallee. It's pretty well uniform. I was talking to a neighbourhood house manager the other day, and she said there's something in the air, and that's what people are feeling. There's a rising sense of desperation in some members of the community, and as often the only the only accessible community space in a lot of small communities. So, they tend to cop that.
When you say it's on the rise, have we got a time frame that you've been seeing sort of issues like this crop up?
Yeah, well, certainly over the last couple of years, and
Right.
there have been a couple of changes that have driven it in some. I mean, I think since COVID, anyone who's in a frontline role will tell you that there has been an increase in antisocial and even violent behaviour right across the board. That's in retail, in any other community service. Anyone who deals with people will tell you that. But the other thing is that neighbourhood houses are increasingly being called upon to meet community need for food relief. As more and more people are affected by the cost of living crisis. And so that has changed the nature of a lot of the services run by neighbourhood houses. And that's not to say that people who are accessing food relief are inherently, antisocial or violent. I definitely wouldn't want to give that impression. But it changes the nature of the interaction with the neighbourhood house. And we are seeing, a lot more people with complex needs and who sometimes are exhibiting that antisocial behaviour.
Well, I can imagine there's also, for the people coming to visit, a lot of fear, a lot of worry about the future. I mean, so much
Absolutely.
boiling over.
Yeah, and there's about that rising level of community desperation, but also, often someone who's running up for food relief, that's not the only issue they're facing in their life. So they often have, complex issues, and unfortunately that sometimes comes out in their behaviour. And it's a new thing for neighbourhood houses because we have always, been that open, safe, welcoming and accessible space in the community for anyone to drop into. And as you're hearing from Rob, that's the nature of that is changing a bit, which is really sad.
I'll go back to Rob for a second. Rob, do you agree? Has this been sort of a bit of an ongoing shift?
Absolutely. And that makes it seem for people that people coming to the door before they could just walk up and come to the door.
Yeah.
Now they need to phone. They've got it's a totally different process, and we've had to put it in place. But it's not as open and friendly as it used to be, because we can't be that way because of people's stresses that they're facing in the community just to survive.
Rob, has it been difficult to even open up and speak out about these issues?
We haven't often had the opportunity. You giving us the opportunity to actually voice it to the wider community, and that's much appreciated. But certainly we do talk around our local contacts within town, and what we see, we hear other services do suffer from similar types of occurrences.
Yeah, and certainly that's what we were just hearing from Keir. And, Keir, to me, it's even maybe more heartbreaking that we're talking about people within the same community trying to do the best for each other. But when we're hearing from Rob describing the security procedures they're going to have to go through now, there's an element of taking trust away from the clients who are coming through. I mean, I don't want to suggest it's dehumanising, but it is making them feel like they're already on the back foot. There's not a good solution there where everyone gets to feel comfortable.
Well, I mean, there is a solution, and that is to increase the staffing levels in neighbourhood houses.
Right.
And so, most neighbourhood houses will only have one paid staff member. In fact, usually only funded for 25 hours a week to have a staff member in place. And so we rely heavily on volunteers, and that's been that is one of the wonderful things about our sector, that it is we have a huge volunteer contingent, and we couldn't operate without them, without those regular volunteers. But again, they're also being made vulnerable in this situation as well. It's hard to think of another frontline service in the community sector where you would have a sole paid worker in place in an open environment to the community, potentially dealing with people with complex needs. You certainly wouldn't see that in other community sectors. And so we asked the state government in the recent budget for funding for some additional staffing, particularly in vulnerable or remote communities. And unfortunately, we're unsuccessful in gaining that.
Had you heard anything from the government about why that wasn't going to be available for you?
We haven't had any feedback, no.
No.
We did ask, we were successful in getting more funding for food relief, which is great because that is a big cost burden on our sector. We're currently doing about 12 tonnes a day of food relief across the state.
Wow.
But what that means is obviously, with that increase in food relief, there is also, increased complexity in the in the people that we're seeing, and so that makes the need for more staff even more critical.
Yeah, because it's all well and good being able to actually have the food, but if you can't find a safe way for it to be taken out to the community, it's kind of pointless.
Yeah, that's right. And look, I would say, I mean, most people that come along and ask for food relief, are not, they're members of the community. They're not violent. They're not aggressive. I don't want to give that impression, but we are seeing in these incidents, and we're seeing them right across the state in many regional and remote communities.
Yeah, Keir and Rob, thank you both very much. Keir Patterson, CEO of Neighbourhood Houses Victoria, and Rob Hankins is the incoming chair, current secretary, I believe, of Open Door Neighbourhood House in Wangaratta, rightfully concerned about staff safety, sometimes very much on their own. And we have seen that rise in violent incidences across the state, as Rob was opening up about 2 staff members physically assaulted at the Wangaratta Open Door Neighbourhood House in the past 12 months. They've had to put some major changes in regarding their security. Joe on the text line saying that anger and violence can often come when people feel like they've lost control of their lives and their future. 0467 842 722 to give me a text call.